So today I'll be talking about Popham's three primary purposes of educational testing. Also be talking about the type of testing that I do in my own classroom and kind of reflecting upon two things, the purpose of each of those tests and really how it impacts my teaching in the classroom. But to start with, talking about Popham's three primary purposes of educational testing. He starts off talking about comparison among test takers. And the way I look at this is really the macro part of testing. You know, we're taking a look at the big picture, really kind of zooming out. When you do this type of testing, what he's referring to is really the comparison part of it. Being able to break it down, to say a subset of, sophomores. And, you can break it down at different levels. Sophomores in your own school. It can go out even bigger, among your own county. We're looking at sophomore scores. It can even go state, looking at this grade level for the state. And, the biggest scale we can look at on a national scale. So those are the, obviously really big tests. So that's the first thing. The second one he talks about is improvement of ongoing instruction and learning. So for these types of tests, what he's referring to basically, those are really the assessments based on, kind of like where you're at. In other words, you can give an assessment and then you can evaluate, well, look over the assessment and then take a look at, well, what needs to be done, okay, in the classroom based off how the kids have scored at this time. Okay, so that's improvement of ongoing instruction and learning. And then the third primary purpose of testing, he talks about evaluation of instruction. So basically, this is really just a small snapshot of how you did. And that could be perhaps like in a particular lesson. So it's really just kind of like a check mark to kind of see what the kids understood from a lesson. So thinking about this, I made a list of all the different assessments that I apply in my classroom. And I was able to come up with 6 different assessments. The first assessment that I use, I don't do this one all the time, but periodically I'll do it, especially when we have like a big unit, a unit that covers like a lot of stuff in it. So I'll do basically a test diagnostic. And basically what I call this is just a pretest. So, for this one right here, I feel like this one kind of falls into 2 Popham's categories, and that would be the comparison among test takers and the improvement of ongoing instruction and learning. 2 reasons for this. One, when I do a test diagnostic, I'm kind of looking at the big picture of the classroom, and I think that fits appropriately with comparisons among test takers. Not only that, but I'm also looking at his second primary purpose, and that's the improvement of ongoing instruction and learning. So I'm basically taking a look at the data from the pretest, and I'm trying to determine, okay, well, what do the students already know? What are they good at? And maybe that's some stuff I can subtract away from that unit. And then I'm looking at also, well, where do they have a big deficit? In other words, what do I need to improve in the classroom? So that's the first assessment. The second type of assessment that I do is what I call informal assessments. So this is basically like, occasionally I'll do what I call a ticket out the door. So basically, this type of informal assessment, I would fit that under Popham's, the evaluation of instruction. So basically, I will do a lesson for a day, and then I'll have some type of assessment directly after the lesson to see really kind of how effective my teaching was on a particular benchmark. Um, so what that basically allows me to do with that ticket out the door, it tells me whether or not, my lesson was effective for that day. And sometimes I've looked at that data and, the kids really didn't understand it or achieve what I wanted them to on the benchmark. So I'll go back and reteach. Okay, the third type of assessment that I do is a basically just a formative assessment. Okay, and for my classroom, kind of how I apply that, I'll do like a quiz. So for that one right there, that I would say definitely fits into Popham's improvement of ongoing instruction and learning. So for that one, the way it kind of impacts my classroom, I evaluate that data, and that one I'm looking at, at multiple benchmarks. Um, so I'm taking a look at that data. I'm seeing what the kids retained. I'm seeing where we have areas of need or areas of concern, and I go back and I readjust um, my activities in the classroom. Okay. So the fourth type of testing that I use is the traditional, a summative assessment. Okay. Um, and, oftentimes uh, that will entail just a standardized, multiple choice testing question test. And, um, that one right there, I would certainly say that fits in the Popham's comparison among test takers. When I'm giving a standardized uh, assessment, I'm generally looking at, all the benchmarks that I have covered in a unit. And I'm taking a look really at the big picture. Okay, well, how did we do? You know, and I'm trying to compare, scores from each student, trying to get that range. Okay, well, are we averaging, at an 82% in the classroom? Okay, that would be kind of a measurement where I see that's pretty effective. If we drop below 80%, and then I really kind of start to have concerns on that aspect of it. Um, so that's it for standardized testing. And really the last thing that I do for assessments, and what I've noticed over the past, I use this assessment in certain classes that I teach more often than other classes that I teach, and that is performance-based assessment. So for this one right here, I'll have students do a project. And to be quite honest with you, this is probably one of my favorite assessments. Um, for this assessment, I'm usually having the students create a product. And for this one right here, I would probably say this falls under Popham's comparison among test takers. That one for me was a little tricky to really categorize. But I guess kind of the overall view, the performance based, I'm kind of looking at individual students on their assessment. So I feel like for Popham's, that's probably the best fit comparison among test takers. But for me, I think students really enjoy this one because they get to create something. And I think that's more meaningful as opposed to sometimes it's like a standardized test of just bubbling in, A, B, C, or D. Um, but I'm always hoping that students can really take something away from the creation of something as opposed to just bubbling stuff in. But all in said, I think really all these assessments really kind of impact my classroom from top to bottom. Each one has certainly its own strengths and weaknesses, but that's why I try to really kind of mix it up and uses really different types of assessments in my classroom. So there you have it.